Hello, late night listeners. David McMillan here, smuggler for 40 years and sometimes winner in the drug wars, but rarely. Imprisoned, tortured, in Asian hellholes, but with lots of experience for all of that. At the high times, I was on the Silk Road with 3 huge mobile homes as we traveled from Hong Kong to through Afghanistan and all the old paths of Alexander the Great. I was a multimillionaire, and I squandered it. And then I paid for my sins. And it turned out that I hadn't paid enough, so I sinned a bit more. But I was remembering today a strange little event from, it wasn't a little event, a sad story from when I was trading in Melbourne. I was importing, and one of my customers was, his name was Michael, and not to be confused with Michael Sullivan, but Michael and another, his goal was Diane, I think. Yes, Michael and Diane. I think I've made it as safe as I can. They were kind of middle-class heroin dealers. Yes, there is such a thing. You might think it's impossible, but they kind of cared for their customers. How much? Well, I suppose they'd take a few ounces a week, break it down into little capsules, which was the trade in those olden days. They weren't wraps or packets or little dime bags. No, empty capsules that were filled with about, a quarter of a gram for, I don't know what, the equivalent of $100. So, amongst their customers was a girl who used to, frankly, she worked the street. She was a prostitute. The hawker with a heart of gold? I'm not so sure about that. For Michael and Diane, they liked the opportunity to look after this girl's baby. I think the baby was about 4 months old when she started dropping the little girl off at Michael and Diane's, and they were childless, but they ran a neat household. Oh, yeah, they had habits, all right, but like clockwork would they run them, and they would never... Well, I'm trying to clean up their act, but honestly, you wouldn't notice anything different. They were part of that narrow band of middle-class heroin users that seemed to keep their life together. They weren't making massive profits, but they were doing all right. And in any event, they took good care of the little girl. Now, when the girl who worked the streets, when she dropped off the child, sometimes she wouldn't return for 2 or 3 days. And over a period of months, this extended. Sometimes the baby would be there for a week. Did Michael and Diane mind? Not at all. The baby, when it was in the mother's care, was brought over not in good condition, nappy rash, always soiled diapers, somehow hungrier than it should have been. Because they couldn't have children of their own, it was an obvious substitute child. They were kind of foster carers in the most illegal world that there is. Now, at one point, the girl never came back for the baby. A couple of months had passed. The baby was now, 14-month-old toddler? And that's where I was asked for my advice. Now, I should tell you people, you kind listeners, when somebody asks for advice, you then have the burden of being the giver of that advice. And with that comes some responsibility. So the answer, gee, that's pretty tough. Damned if I know what you're going to do. Hell, hate to be in your shoes. That would be probably the sensible answer. But I was asked this: what if that girl, the true mother of the baby, 14-month-old, never returned? What if? Well, of course, I said, you're not legally, you've got no hold here. It doesn't matter the character of the mother. The mother's the mother. If she doesn't come back for a year's time. Well, I made inquiries. Yes, look, I was young. I didn't know better than to stand back. I could see a tragedy unfolding, and, well, anyway. So I reported back to Michael and Diane that the mother had a bad boyfriend, yet another one. She'd been, instead of working the streets, or in addition to, she and the new boyfriend had been part of a hold-up, a kind of feeble robbery of a cashier that was putting late-night deposits from a shop. Well, it all went badly, and this woman was in the car. She was arrested. Did I say, by the way, that this was something like, well, now, 3 years later? Yes, the baby was no longer just a gurgling infant in a cot. She was a young child. And indeed, Michael and Diane were mum and dad. And she called them so. Now, nothing much happened for a while. I think the girl was, the true mother was bailed out. She went back to working her usual things. She was back on the street. And she had this, she had that. Almost 2 years passed, and because she'd never reported on her initial bail conditions, when she was arrested the second time, she needed some strong ammunition to get out. Perhaps not on bail, but to somehow reduce the charges, to get away from serious jail time. Now, what did this girl have up her sleeve? She had a bad boyfriend, that's no use. She had a pretty grim record. Lots of things for dishonesty, deception, and of course the prostitution, which never helps. Oh yes, she had a baby somewhere 5 years ago that she left with, who was it? Michael and Diane. Well, this girl got talking to her lawyer, and the lawyer said, well, my dear, that is the obvious thing. You must be reunited with your child. I can see naught else for it. And that's where I step back in. I'm not really doing business with Michael and Diane anymore, but I know people who are, and since I opened my stupid yap the first time, I'd probably be good for advice the second time. What can we do? Because they'd heard that, I think they'd moved house once. They'd heard, though, that the lawyer was looking for the baby. And sure enough, they were not the kind of people that live completely off the grid, off radar. They would be found. Okay. I went to my own lawyer, a man of mercurial talents and wide-ranged ideas. A man who got many of us off a 1-ton marijuana charge on the basis that it was not cannabis sativa L, that which was prescribed by law, but another kind of cannabis. So the state had no case. They didn't like that. But I point this out because he was a lawyer who knew his stuff. But in this case, he scoffed. David, those people will have no chance of being able to keep that child. If they are approached, well, nothing can be done. It'll be a tragedy. Did the girl, the mother, the one who'd been working on the streets and the robberies, did she know of Michael and Diane's actual occupation, their drug dealer status? Of course. Then there's no chance at all. They shouldn't even try it. Well, this was the news that I had to take back to Michael and Diane and 5-year-old Shelly, I think her name was. Yeah. It was not news they really wanted to hear, but I did suggest an alternative. I took Michael aside, and in fact, I think Diane was there, but she didn't say much, just looked. Michael, I said, there is a solution to your problem. This girl was actually released on a kind of special kind of bail. So she's out and about, but she is coming for her child. She needs that for the sentencing itself. She needs something to reduce it. There is a possibility, but I can never tell you what that thing is. All I can tell you is there is a solution. But here's the thing. Will you be able to live with that? I'll say nothing of it, but that woman will never ask for the child. I'll say nothing more about it. In fact, this conversation never took place. But I ask this: can you live with it? I don't know, when the girl is a teenager herself, or in later years than that, if she asks of her biological mother, what will you say? Will you be able to keep your darkest secret? Will a time ever come when you feel bad about that? If she strays, young Shelly, now 5, but one day surely 15, will you want to tell her? Will you have guilt on your shoulders? Can you live with all of this? Can you send me on my way tonight saying, yes, David, a solution would be good, and then never speak of it again? Now, what the hell was I doing? Yes, you can guess what the solution was. The woman would have to disappear. The mechanics of that need not trouble this story. But here's the point. Why was I asking a question to which I knew the answer? The fact that I wanted to ask it, where was I coming from with that? I really knew that the secret would never be safe. The day might come, perhaps when little Shelly grew up and there'd been arguments, when she showed signs of being like her mother. God knows how many ways within a family dark truths can come out. Okay, I was trying to feebly protect myself should that day ever arrive. And to some extent, I was trying to say to Michael and Diane, it might seem like an answer, but perhaps it's not. Perhaps you should think twice before committing yourself into that deep, dark world of death and secrets. Well, of course, they demurred. They thought they'd have difficulty with that. They took some time to think about it, and I was fairly sure that would be their decision. But what's the point of this story? Well, let me at least tell you what happens next with young Shelly. At 5.5 years old, there is this scene. There is a social worker. There are police lurking in the background should there be any trouble. There are lawyers of various kinds. Their glutinous forms and sticky suits stuck on the surface of cars and doorways. They're about. The scene also, and importantly, has the 5.5-year-old screaming, weeping for Mum and Dad, for Michael and Diane, because she knows she's being torn from their home. Yeah. She was taken away, back to the mother. And what more important thing is there than biological motherhood? Well, we'll know in our far future, but that question seems fairly plain now. It was the end of Diane and Michael. Their relationship crumbled. They could no longer sit across a table with each other, knowing that empty space, a house filled with the child's laughter and growing and first steps, and the pictures were all put away. No, their own lawyer said you're lucky not to have been arrested for kidnapping, because the girl added some colour to the story. She'd said that Little Shelly was given over for a drug debt. I mean, can you imagine? And it was a price, it was blackmail, it was under duress. She would never have let her go had she not had her addiction. And these filthy scum, these dealers, well, they would have done anything to get the child. I mean, can you imagine the theatrical opportunities that scenario presented for the defendant? But the child, she went back to the mother, and I think the successor boyfriend that came along. I didn't keep too close to the story, but I like to know what's going on the street, what happens to people. Shelly did come to the age of 15, and was she like her mother in any way? Well, I'm surely so. But she did have a fascination for the underworld, and she was drawn to it. Some of you might be wondering, was it in her genes, the poor kid? Or was the truth about her background too enticing, too terrible? The separation from the calm, placid, happy people that she considered her parents, was that so great a trauma that her only way to deal with it was to put herself back in her mother's imagined position, drug using on the streets, living on the edge. Well, she was a wreck. Could it get any more theatrical? Well, she didn't die, at least. No. Little Shelly had some adventures, and I believe settled down to a kind of suicidal state and self-harm. And I lost track of the story after she was about 18, I think. But it didn't look too good. Did I feel bad about it? Should I have acted? Or can you walk away from a message out of all this mess? The child taken from people who would have made and did make great parents into that life of uncertainty, and with being given that fruit of the tree of knowledge, in which case that nearly destroyed her. And how bad was I in the villain? I'll say this. If you feel bold, if you feel you can do anything, and you have the power to do it, keep your damn mouth shut and just do it. If I'd have been anything like I was, perhaps 15, 20 years later, when I was over 35, I wouldn't have said a word. Perhaps there would have been a night when Michael and Diane would say, "What have you heard about Shelley's real mother?" Though they never would have used those words. And on such a night I could say, not a thing. She left town, found a new boyfriend in another state. I heard she left the country. I've heard nothing. People say she died. Whatever. I should have either acted or not acted, but not said anything either way. What was I doing? Showing that I had the power to do these things? Taunting them with the possibility that they could never live with? I was so young and stupid that I didn't understand that the more powerful you might be, the less you say. That if you have somehow acquired that ability to make judgments over people's future, this is not the time for talk. This is not the time to throw the whole subject up on her dining room table or around her kitchen or in anybody's ears. You keep quiet. If you can do something good, do it and say nothing. Let somebody else take credit. Let fate, let God, let the Almighty, let the saints be praised for the fortunes that happen. don't worry about collecting it yourself. You might take some satisfaction. That was a happy outcome. And anyway, who knows? Perhaps Shelley would have been Shelley herself in the end the same. Who knows? But this is all I can say with any certainty. If you have a special opportunity, don't promote it. Don't advertise it. Don't give anybody a choice. You still feeling confident about all that? Not giving choices? Well, if you can't live with that, do nothing. And still say nothing. Which only goes to say that most talk is unhelpful. But action in secret can be a powerful and sometimes a beautiful thing. Good night. Well, that was a bit dark, wasn't it? Use it? No, I don't know. Yeah, why not? Let the mob decide. They might as well know how dark it does get. Oh, Jerry, take this thing off the end, will you? Yeah. Yeah, good night to you too. Yeah, I've taken care of that.